Helena Ashworth sat by her bedroom window, watching the morning sun shine on the big gardens of her family's estate. She was 22 years old, and very beautiful. Her long brown hair fell down her back like silk. Her green eyes sparkled when she smiled. Helena was the daughter of Lord Ashworth, one of the richest and most important men in England. But today, Helena was not smiling. Her hands shook as she held a letter. The letter was from someone she loved very much, but someone she was not supposed to love. His name was Charles Bennet, and he was a married man who worked in the government. Helena had met Charles 6 months ago at a big party in London. He was smart and handsome, with dark hair and kind eyes. When he talked to Helena, she felt like the most important person in the world. Charles told her that his wife did not understand him. He said his marriage was unhappy and that he had never felt love like this before. Helena believed him. She was young and had never been in love before. Her father had always told her that she would marry someone he chose for her. That person would be rich and have a good family name. But Helena wanted to choose love for herself. For 6 months, Helena and Charles wrote letters to each other. They met in secret places. Sometimes they walked in the park together when no one was looking. Other times they met in small coffee shops where no one knew them. Helena felt alive and happy when she was with Charles. Charles promised Helena that he would leave his wife soon. He said they would run away together and get married. Helena dreamed of this every day. She thought about living in a small house with Charles, far away from her father's rules and expectations. But Helena did not know that her father had people watching her. Lord Ashworth was a careful man who did not trust anyone completely. He had servants who told him everything that happened in his house and around his family. One of these servants was Mary, Helena's personal maid. Mary had worked for the Ashworth family for 10 years. She cleaned Helena's room every day and helped her get dressed. Mary also read Helena's letters when Helena was not in the room. Mary felt bad about reading the letters, but she was more afraid of Lord Ashworth than she was sorry for Helena. Lord Ashworth paid Mary's wages and gave her a place to live. If Mary lost her job, she would have nowhere to go and no money to live on. Every week, Mary told Lord Ashworth what she had learned. She told him about the letters from Charles. She told him about Helena's secret meetings. She told him about Helena's dreams of running away. Lord Ashworth listened to all of this with a cold, angry face. He did not show his feelings, but inside he was furious. His daughter was bringing shame to their family name. If people found out about Helena and Charles, no one would respect the Ashworth family anymore. The worst part was that Charles Bennet was married. In their time, it was a terrible thing for a woman to have a relationship with a married man. People would call Helena bad names. They would say she was not a good woman. Other rich families would not want their sons to marry into the Ashworth family. Lord Ashworth decided to wait and watch. He wanted to catch Helena doing something that would prove her guilt completely. He wanted to have strong proof before he punished her. The proof came on a cold October morning. Mary found Helena in the garden reading a new letter from Charles. Helena was crying happy tears because Charles had written that he was ready to leave his wife. He wanted Helena to meet him the next week so they could go away together. Helena was so excited that she did not see Mary watching from behind a tree. Mary quickly went to find Lord Ashworth and told him what she had seen. Lord Ashworth walked quietly to the garden. He saw Helena sitting on a stone bench, holding the letter close to her heart. Her face was full of joy and hope. "Helena," Lord Ashworth said in a voice like ice. Helena jumped up, surprised and frightened. She tried to hide the letter behind her back, but it was too late. "Give me that letter," her father said. "Father, I can explain," Helena said, but her voice was weak and scared. "Give me the letter now," Lord Ashworth repeated. Helena's hand trembled as she gave him the letter. Lord Ashworth read it slowly. His face became red with anger. The letter said things that proved Helena and Charles were in love. It talked about their meetings and their plans to run away together. "You have brought shame to our family," Lord Ashworth said. His voice was quiet, but Helena could hear the terrible anger in it. "Father, please listen to me," Helena begged. Charles loves me. We want to be married. Charles Bennet is already married, Lord Ashworth said. You are having an affair with a married man. Do you know what this means for our family? Helena started to cry. Charles said he will leave his wife. We will be married soon. Lord Ashworth laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. Charles Bennet will never leave his wife. Men like him never do. He is using you, Helena. He is playing with you like a toy. That is not true, Helena said, but her voice was not strong anymore. You are a foolish girl, Lord Ashworth said. You have believed the lies of a man who cares nothing for you, and now our whole family must pay for your stupidity. Lord Ashworth called for servants to come to the garden. When they arrived, he told them to take Helena to her room and lock the door. Helena was not allowed to leave her room or talk to anyone. You will stay in your room until I decide what to do with you, Lord Ashworth told Helena. Helena cried and begged, but her father would not listen. The servants took her arms and led her to the big house. Helena looked back at the garden where she had been so happy just a few minutes before. Now everything was ruined. In her room, Helena threw herself on her bed and cried until she had no more tears. She thought about Charles and wondered if he really loved her. She thought about her father's angry words. Maybe Charles would never leave his wife. Maybe she had been foolish to believe him. 3 days passed. Helena stayed in her room with only Mary bringing her food. Helena tried to talk to Mary, but Mary would not say anything. Mary just brought food and left quickly. On the 4th day, Lord Ashworth came to Helena's room. He looked tired and old. Helena could see that he had not slept well. I have decided what will happen to you, Lord Ashworth said. Helena sat up on her bed and looked at her father with frightened eyes. You will be married, Lord Ashworth said. For a moment, Helena felt hope. Maybe her father had talked to Charles. Maybe Charles had agreed to leave his wife. You will marry Thomas Hartwell, Lord Ashworth continued. Helena stared at her father. She could not believe what she had heard. Thomas Hartwell? She whispered. Thomas Hartwell was the man who took care of their gardens. He was a servant. He was not rich or important. He was just a working man who planted flowers and cut grass. That is impossible, Helena said. I cannot marry a servant. You can and you will, Lord Ashworth said. This is your punishment for bringing shame to our family. You wanted to choose your own husband. Now I am choosing one for you. Helena felt like the world was falling down around her. Marrying Thomas Hartwell would mean she could never go back to her old life. No rich family would ever accept her. She would lose everything she had ever known. Father, please, Helena begged. I will never see Charles again. I will marry anyone you choose from a good family. Please do not do this to me. But Lord Ashworth had made his decision. His daughter had brought shame to their family name. Now she would learn what it meant to live without the respect and comfort she had always known. The wedding will be next month, Lord Ashworth said. Thomas Hartwell has agreed to marry you. You should be grateful that anyone is willing to marry you after what you have done. Lord Ashworth left the room and locked the door behind him. Helena was alone again, but now her future looked darker than ever. She was going to marry a man she barely knew, a man who worked with his hands in the dirt. Her life as a lady was over. Helena spent the next week in her room hoping her father would change his mind. She wrote letters to him, begging him to reconsider. She promised to be a good daughter and never cause trouble again. But Lord Ashworth never answered her letters. Every day Mary brought Helena food and clean clothes. Helena tried to talk to Mary about Thomas Hartwell. What kind of man is he? Helena asked. Mary looked uncomfortable. He is a good worker, miss. He takes care of the gardens very well. But what is he like as a person? Helena pressed. Mary shrugged. He keeps to himself mostly. He reads books sometimes when his work is done. He is not married and has no family. This was all Helena could learn about the man she was supposed to marry. She tried to remember seeing Thomas around the estate. But she had never paid attention to the servants before. They were just people who worked for her family, not real people, with names and feelings. Helena's mother, Lady Margaret Ashworth, finally came to visit her. Lady Margaret was a thin woman with gray hair and tired eyes. She always did what her husband told her to do. "Helena, my dear," Lady Margaret said sadly, "why did you do this to us?" "Mother, please help me," Helena begged. "Talk to father. Make him change his mind." Lady Margaret shook her head. "Your father is very angry. He says our family name is ruined because of you. He says this is the only way to teach you a lesson." "But mother, marrying Thomas Hartwell will ruin me forever," Helena cried. "Maybe that is what you deserve," Lady Margaret said, but her voice was not harsh. She sounded sad and tired. "Helena, you knew it was wrong to see a married man. You knew what would happen if people found out." "I thought Charles loved me," Helena whispered. "Love," Lady Margaret said with a bitter laugh. "Love does not put food on the table or keep a roof over your head. Love does not protect a family's reputation. You should have thought about duty instead of love." Lady Margaret told Helena that the wedding would happen in 2 weeks. It would be a small ceremony with only the immediate family present. No friends would be invited. No big party would be held. It would be quick and quiet, like something shameful that needed to be hidden. "Thomas Hartwell will live in the small cottage behind the stables," Lady Margaret explained. "You will live there with him as his wife. You will no longer live in the main house." Helena felt sick when she heard this. The cottage behind the stables was tiny. It had only 3 rooms and no servants. Helena had never cooked a meal or cleaned a house in her life. She had always had people to do these things for her. "What will I do all day?" Helena asked. "You will be a wife," Lady Margaret said. "You will cook and clean and take care of your husband. That is what wives do." After her mother left, Helena lay on her bed and stared at the ceiling. She thought about her old life, when her biggest worry was choosing which dress to wear to a party. Now she was going to marry a man she did not know and live in a tiny cottage like a poor person. Helena also thought about Charles Bennet. Did he know what had happened to her? Did he care? She realized that she had no way to contact him. Her father had probably made sure of that. Days passed slowly. Helena heard servants in the hallway talking about her upcoming wedding. Some of them sounded sorry for her. Others sounded like they thought she deserved her punishment. "She always acted like she was better than us," Helena heard one maid say. "Now she will know what it is like to work for a living." "The poor girl," another servant said. "She is so young. She made a mistake, but this punishment seems too harsh." Helena realized that her wedding was the biggest news on the estate. Everyone was talking about it. The daughter of Lord Ashworth was marrying a gardener. It was something that had never happened before. 1 week before the wedding, Helena was finally allowed to leave her room. Her father wanted her to meet Thomas Hartwell before they got married. Helena put on a simple blue dress and walked downstairs with shaking legs. She had not left her room in 3 weeks, and the hallways of her own house seemed strange and unfamiliar. Lord Ashworth was waiting in his study with Thomas Hartwell. Helena had expected Thomas to look dirty and rough like the workers she sometimes saw from her bedroom window. But Thomas looked clean and neat. He had washed his face and combed his brown hair. He wore simple but clean clothes. Thomas was not a young man. Helena guessed he was about 35 years old. He was not handsome like Charles Bennet, but he was not ugly either. He had kind brown eyes and strong hands that showed he worked hard for a living. "Helena, this is Thomas Hartwell," Lord Ashworth said. "Thomas, this is my daughter Helena." Thomas stood up and gave a small bow. "Hello, Miss Ashworth," he said quietly. Helena did not know what to say. She had never talked to a servant as an equal before. "Hello," she finally managed to say. "Sit down, both of you," Lord Ashworth commanded. Helena and Thomas sat in chairs across from each other. Helena kept her eyes on her hands and tried not to look at Thomas. "Thomas, you understand what this marriage means," Lord Ashworth said. "Yes, sir," Thomas replied. I understand that Miss Helena has caused some trouble, and you want her to learn from her mistakes. Helena felt her face turn red with shame. Even the servant knew about her disgrace. You will be responsible for her behavior from now on, Lord Ashworth continued. She will live in your cottage and follow your rules. If she causes any more problems, you will answer to me. I understand, sir, Thomas said. Helena wanted to speak up and say that she was not a child who needed to be controlled, but she knew that saying anything would only make her father angrier. Helena, you will obey your husband in all things, Lord Ashworth told her. You will cook his meals, clean his house, and do whatever work he tells you to do. You are no longer a lady of this house. You are the wife of a working man. Helena nodded, but inside she felt angry and scared. How could her father treat her like this? How could he give her away to a stranger like she was a piece of property? The wedding will be this Saturday at 10 in the morning, Lord Ashworth announced. It will be in the small chapel on the estate. Only family will attend. After the meeting, Helena walked back to her room feeling numb. In 6 days, she would be married to Thomas Hartwell. In 6 days, her old life would be completely over. Helena spent the rest of the week thinking about her future. She would live in a tiny cottage and cook meals over a fire. She would wash clothes by hand and sweep floors. She had never done any of these things before. Helena also thought about Thomas. He had seemed quiet and polite, but she knew nothing about him as a person. Did he have friends? What did he like to do when he was not working? Did he want to marry her? Or was he just following Lord Ashworth's orders? On Friday night, Helena's mother brought her a simple white dress for the wedding. It was nothing like the beautiful gown Helena had always imagined wearing on her wedding day. This is all you need, Lady Margaret said. You are not marrying a lord or a gentleman. You do not need fancy clothes. Helena held the plain dress and felt tears come to her eyes. She had always dreamed of a big wedding with hundreds of guests and a beautiful dress covered in lace and pearls. Now she would wear a simple white dress that looked like something a servant might wear. Mother, Helena said softly, do you think Thomas Hartwell is a good man? Lady Margaret sighed. I do not know him well, Helena, but he has worked for our family for many years and he has never caused any trouble. He seems honest and hardworking. But do you think he will be kind to me? Helena asked. I hope so, my dear, Lady Margaret said. But remember, this is not a love marriage, this is a punishment. Thomas Hartwell is doing your father a favor by agreeing to marry you. You should be grateful to him. That night, Helena could not sleep. She lay in her bed and listened to the sounds of the house. Tomorrow night she would be sleeping in a different bed in a tiny cottage with a man she barely knew. Her life was about to change completely, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Helena thought about running away. She had some jewelry that she could sell for money. Maybe she could escape to another city and start a new life. But where would she go? She had no skills and no friends outside of her family's social circle. A young woman alone in the world would face many dangers. Helena also thought about Charles Bennet one more time. She wondered if he even knew what had happened to her. She wondered if he would care. She realized now that her father was probably right about Charles. If Charles really loved her, he would have found a way to contact her by now. He would have tried to save her from this marriage, but Charles had not come. No one was coming to save her. Tomorrow she would marry Thomas Hartwell, and her old life would be gone forever. As Helena finally fell asleep, she made a decision. She would try to be a good wife to Thomas even though she did not love him. She would learn to cook and clean and do all the things that wives were supposed to do. Maybe if she worked hard and caused no more trouble, her father would forgive her someday. But deep in her heart, Helena felt angry about the unfairness of her situation. Men like Charles Bennet could have affairs and face no punishment. But women like her lost everything for the same behavior. It was not fair. But it was the way the world worked. Tomorrow, Helena Ashworth would become Helena Hartwell, and her real punishment would begin. Saturday morning came too quickly for Helena. She woke up before dawn and sat by her window, watching the sun rise over the gardens where Thomas worked every day. In a few hours, those gardens would belong to her new world. Mary came to help Helena get dressed for her wedding. The simple white dress felt strange after years of wearing elaborate gowns with many layers and decorations. Helena looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the sad, plain woman staring back at her. "You look nice, miss," Mary said quietly, but Helena could hear the pity in her voice. "Thank you, Mary," Helena replied. She wanted to ask Mary to help her escape, but she knew Mary would never risk her job for Helena's sake. At 9:30, Helena walked downstairs to meet her family. Her father wore his best black suit, but his face showed no happiness. Her mother wore dark blue and looked like she was attending a funeral instead of a wedding. Helena's younger brother, William, was there too. William was 19 years old and would inherit everything when their father died. He looked at Helena with a mixture of sadness and disgust. "I cannot believe you are actually going through with this," William whispered to Helena as they walked to the chapel. "I have no choice," Helena whispered back. The chapel was a small stone building on the edge of the estate. Helena had prayed there many times as a child, but today it felt cold and unwelcoming. Only a few people were inside waiting for them. Thomas stood at the front of the chapel wearing his best clothes. He had clearly tried to look nice for the wedding, but his clothes were still simple and plain compared to what Helena was used to seeing at weddings. The priest, Father Morrison, looked uncomfortable. He had baptized Helena as a baby and watched her grow up. Now he had to perform this strange wedding that everyone knew was a punishment rather than a celebration. Helena walked down the short aisle with her father. Her legs felt weak and she thought she might fall down. Lord Ashworth's grip on her arm was firm and cold. He was not giving his daughter away with love and joy. He was delivering her to her punishment. When they reached Thomas, Lord Ashworth placed Helena's hand in Thomas's hand. Thomas's hand was rough and calloused from years of working in the dirt, but it was warm and gentle. Helena was surprised that his touch did not feel unpleasant. "Take care of her," Lord Ashworth said to Thomas, but his voice sounded more like a threat than a blessing. "I will, sir," Thomas replied quietly. Father Morrison began the wedding ceremony. Helena tried to listen to the words, but her mind felt foggy and distant. She heard herself saying, "I do," when the priest asked if she would take Thomas as her husband, but the words seemed to come from someone else. Thomas also said, "I do," when asked if he would take Helena as his wife. His voice was steady and calm, as if he was agreeing to take care of the gardens rather than marrying a woman he barely knew. The ceremony was short and simple. There were no flowers, no music, and no celebration. When Father Morrison pronounced them husband and wife, Thomas gave Helena a gentle kiss on her cheek. His lips were soft and he smelled like soap and fresh air. Helena was now Mrs. Thomas Hartwell. The name sounded strange and foreign to her ears. After the ceremony, there was no wedding feast or party. Lord Ashworth shook Thomas's hand and reminded him of his responsibilities. Lady Margaret gave Helena a brief, sad hug. "Be a good wife," her mother whispered in her ear. William said goodbye to Helena with tears in his eyes. "I will miss you, sister," he said. Helena realized that this might be the last time she would see her family for a long time. As the wife of a servant, she would not be welcome at family dinners or social events. Thomas led Helena away from the chapel toward the back of the estate where his cottage was located. Helena had never walked to this part of the property before. It was far from the main house, behind the stables and near the vegetable gardens. The cottage was smaller than Helena had imagined. It was made of gray stone with a red roof. There were 3 small windows and a wooden door painted green. A tiny garden in front of the cottage had some flowers and herbs growing in it. "This is our home," Thomas said simply as he opened the door. Helena stepped inside and looked around. The main room served as both kitchen and sitting area. There was a stone fireplace with a few pots and pans hanging beside it. A wooden table with 2 chairs sat in the center of the room. Everything was clean, but very simple. "The bedroom is through there," Thomas pointed to a doorway. "And there is a small room for storage." Helena walked into the bedroom and saw a simple wooden bed covered with plain white sheets. There was a small chest for clothes and one tiny window. The room was smaller than the closet in her old bedroom. Thomas followed her into the bedroom, but stayed near the doorway. "I know this is very different from what you are used to," he said gently. Helena turned to look at her new husband. He seemed nervous and uncomfortable, just like she was. "Yes, it is very different," Helena admitted. "I want you to know that I will try to make this as easy as possible for you," Thomas said. "I know you did not choose this marriage." Helena was surprised by his kindness. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I sleep early because I start work before sunrise," Thomas explained. "You can arrange the house however you like during the day. I will not bother you unless you need something." Helena nodded. She appreciated that Thomas was trying to be considerate, but she still felt trapped and lost. "Are you hungry?" Thomas asked. "I have some bread and cheese." Helena realized she had not eaten anything since the night before. Her stomach was empty, but she felt too nervous to eat. "Yes, thank you," she said. They sat at the small wooden table and ate bread and cheese in silence. Helena kept looking around the tiny cottage and comparing it to the grand dining room where she used to eat her meals. Everything here was so plain and simple. "What do you normally do in the evenings?" Helena asked, trying to make conversation. "I read mostly," Thomas replied. "Sometimes I write in my journal about the plants and flowers I am growing." Helena was surprised. "You can read and write?" Thomas looked a little hurt by her surprise. "Yes, I taught myself when I was young. I have always loved learning new things." Helena felt embarrassed for assuming that Thomas was uneducated just because he was a servant. "I am sorry. I did not mean to sound rude." "It is all right," Thomas said. "Most people think servants are ignorant, but many of us have taught ourselves to read and write because we want to better ourselves." After they finished eating, Thomas showed Helena where everything was located in the cottage. He showed her how to cook over the fire and where to get water from the well outside. Everything was so different from Helena's old life, where servants did all of these tasks for her. "Tomorrow I will teach you how to tend the vegetable garden," Thomas said. "Growing your own food will help us save money." Helena nodded, but inside she felt overwhelmed. She had never grown anything in her life. She had never even touched dirt with her bare hands. As evening approached, Helena realized she would have to share the small bedroom with Thomas. She felt nervous and scared about sleeping in the same bed with a man she barely knew. Thomas seemed to understand her feelings. "I will sleep on the floor tonight," he said kindly. "You can have the bed until you feel more comfortable." Helena was grateful for his consideration. "Thank you, Thomas, you are very kind." "We are married now," Thomas said. "We must try to be kind to each other." That night, Helena lay in the small bed listening to Thomas breathing on the floor beside her. She stared at the ceiling and thought about how much her life had changed in just one day. This morning, she had been Helena Ashworth, daughter of a lord. Tonight she was Helena Hartwell, wife of a gardener. Helena thought about her old bedroom with its soft, warm bed and beautiful decorations. She thought about the servants who used to bring her tea in the morning and help her choose her clothes. All of that was gone now. But as Helena listened to Thomas's steady breathing, she realized that he was trying to make the best of a difficult situation. He had not asked to marry her any more than she had asked to marry him, yet he was treating her with kindness and respect. Helena wondered what Thomas's life had been like before their marriage. Had he ever been in love? Had he wanted to marry someone else? Did he resent being forced to take care of Lord Ashworth's troublesome daughter? These questions made Helena realize how little she knew about the man she had just married. She had spent months learning everything about Charles Bennet, but she knew almost nothing about her own husband. As the days ahead stretched out before her, Helena felt both frightened and curious. This tiny cottage would be her world now. Thomas would be her only companion. She would have to learn to live a completely different kind of life. Helena had always thought that love was the most important thing in marriage. But lying in that small bed on her wedding night, she began to wonder if kindness and respect might be more important than she had realized. Thomas had shown her both kindness and respect today, even though he had every reason to be angry about their forced marriage. Maybe, Helena thought, there was hope for them after all. But as sleep finally came to her, Helena still felt the weight of her punishment. She was no longer a lady. She was no longer free to make her own choices. She was Thomas Hartwell's wife, and she would have to live with the consequences of her actions for the rest of her life. Helena woke up to the sound of birds singing outside the cottage window. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then she remembered everything that had happened, and her heart sank. She was married to Thomas Hartwell and living in a tiny cottage. Behind the stables, Thomas was already gone from the floor beside her bed. Helena could smell something cooking and hear quiet movements in the main room. She got dressed quickly and went to see what Thomas was doing. Thomas was standing by the fireplace, cooking porridge in a small pot. He'd already washed and dressed for his day of work. His brown hair was combed neatly and his clothes were clean but worn from years of use. "Good morning, Helena," Thomas said politely. "I made some breakfast for you." "Thank you," Helena replied. She felt awkward calling him by his first name, but Mr. Hartwell seemed too formal for a husband. Thomas served Helena a bowl of hot porridge with a little milk and honey. It was simple food, but it tasted good and warmed her stomach. "I must start work now," Thomas said as he finished his own breakfast. "The flowers need watering, and Lord Ashworth wants me to plant new roses near the main house." Helena nodded. "What should I do while you are working?" "Whatever you like," Thomas said. "You can explore the cottage and get used to living here. There are some books on the shelf if you want to read." Helena was surprised to hear that Thomas owned books. She looked around and saw a small wooden shelf with about 20 books on it. Most servants she knew could not read at all, let alone own a collection of books. After Thomas left for work, Helena examined the books on his shelf. She expected to find simple stories or maybe religious books. Instead, she found books about plants and flowers, books about farming, and even some books of poetry. Helena picked up a book called The Study of Plant Growth and opened it. Inside the front cover, someone had written in neat handwriting, "To improve our understanding of nature's ways." The handwriting was Thomas's. Helena began reading the book and was amazed by what she found. The book was full of detailed notes written in the margins by Thomas. He had studied every page carefully and written down his own thoughts and observations. One note said, "Tried this method on the roses behind the stable. Plants grew twice as tall as usual." Another note said, "This technique could help farmers grow more food on less land." Helena realized that Thomas was not just a simple gardener who followed orders. He was studying plants and trying new ways to help them grow better. He was like a scientist, but instead of working in a laboratory, he worked in the dirt. Helena spent the morning reading Thomas's books and looking at his notes. She found books about soil and water, books about which plants grew well together, and books about plant diseases. Thomas had filled every book with his own observations and ideas. Around noon, Helena decided to take a walk outside. She had never explored this part of the estate before. Behind the cottage, there was a large vegetable garden with neat rows of cabbages, carrots, and beans. Everything was perfectly organized and very healthy looking. Helena walked further and discovered a small greenhouse that she had never noticed before. Inside the greenhouse, Thomas was growing exotic plants that Helena had never seen. There were plants with unusual colored leaves and flowers that looked like they came from faraway places. Thomas was kneeling beside a plant with bright red flowers, carefully examining its leaves. He looked up when Helena entered the greenhouse. "Oh, hello," Thomas said, looking surprised to see her. "I did not expect you to come here." "I was curious about your work," Helena said. "These plants are beautiful. Where did they come from?" Thomas stood up and brushed dirt off his hands. "I ordered the seeds from a company in London. I am trying to see if these tropical plants can grow in our English climate." Helena looked around the greenhouse with new eyes. "You ordered seeds from London? How did you know what to order?" "I read about these plants in books and journals," Thomas explained. "I write letters to other gardeners around England, and we share information about what we are growing." Helena was amazed. Thomas had his own correspondence with other gardeners? He was conducting his own research? This was not the simple, uneducated servant she had imagined. "This plant here," Thomas said, pointing to a plant with large, glossy leaves, "produces a fruit that can be made into medicine. If I can grow it successfully here, it could help sick people in our area." Helena stared at Thomas. "You are trying to grow medicine?" "Plants are the source of most medicines," Thomas said. "If we can grow medicinal plants locally, we do not have to buy expensive medicines from far away." Helena felt like she was seeing Thomas for the first time. He was not just taking care of Lord Ashworth's gardens to keep his job. He was trying to improve the world through his work with plants. "How did you learn all of this?" Helena asked. Thomas looked embarrassed. "I have always been curious about plants. When I was a boy, I found books in the library of my previous employer. I taught myself to read so I could understand them. Over the years, I have collected my own books and learned from other gardeners." Helena realized that Thomas was probably more educated than many of the wealthy men she had known. He had educated himself through years of reading and studying, not because he had to for school, but because he loved learning. "Would you like to see something interesting?" Thomas asked. Helena nodded, and Thomas led her to a corner of the greenhouse where several plants were growing in unusual containers. Instead of regular pots, these plants were growing in containers made from old boots, broken pottery, and even a rusty bucket. "I am testing to see if plants can grow well in unusual containers," Thomas explained. "Many poor people cannot afford proper pots for gardens. If I can prove that plants grow well in recycled containers, I can teach poor families how to grow their own food even if they have no money for gardening supplies." Helena was touched by Thomas's desire to help poor people. Most wealthy people she knew, including her own family, rarely thought about helping the poor. "The plant in the old boot is actually growing better than the one in the expensive pot," Thomas continued. "It seems that plants care more about good soil and water than fancy containers." Helena spent the rest of the afternoon in the greenhouse with Thomas. He showed her his experiments and explained his theories about plant growth. Helena found herself genuinely interested in what he was saying. Thomas was patient and kind when Helena asked questions. He never made her feel stupid for not knowing about plants. Instead, he seemed happy to share his knowledge with someone who was curious. "You know a lot about many different subjects," Helena said as they walked back to the cottage for dinner. "I love learning," Thomas said simply. "Every day I try to learn something new. Books have been my teachers since I was a child." That evening, Thomas cooked a simple dinner of vegetables from his garden and bread that he had baked himself. Helena was impressed that Thomas could cook as well as garden. "Did you teach yourself to cook too?" Helena asked. "Yes," Thomas said. "When you live alone, you learn to do many things for yourself." After dinner, Thomas sat by the fireplace and opened a book. Helena watched him read and realized that this was probably how he spent every evening. While wealthy people attended parties and social events, Thomas spent his free time learning and thinking. "What are you reading?" Helena asked. Thomas showed her the book. It was about new farming techniques being used in other countries. "There is a man in Germany who has developed a way to grow 3 times more wheat on the same amount of land," Thomas said excitedly. "If English farmers could learn this technique, we could feed many more people." Helena was struck by Thomas's enthusiasm. He talked about farming techniques the way other men talked about politics or money. His passion for his work was genuine and deep. "Do you ever get lonely living by yourself and just reading in the evenings?" Helena asked. Thomas considered the question carefully. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But books are good company, and I find great satisfaction in my work with plants." Helena realized that Thomas had built a rich and meaningful life for himself, even though he was just a servant. He had interests, goals, and dreams that went far beyond his daily duties. "Thomas," Helena said carefully, "do you mind that you had to marry me? I know this was not your choice." Thomas looked at her with his kind brown eyes. "To be honest, I was nervous about it," he said. "I thought you might be unhappy and make life difficult for both of us. But you seem like a reasonable person who is trying to make the best of the situation. What did you think of me before we got married?" Helena asked. I rarely saw you except from a distance, Thomas said. I knew you were beautiful and well-educated. I also knew you had gotten into some kind of trouble, but I did not know the details. Helena felt embarrassed thinking about how Thomas must see her. You must think I am a foolish woman who caused trouble for my family. I think you are a young woman who fell in love with the wrong person, Thomas said gently. That is not the same as being foolish. Many people have made similar mistakes. Helena was surprised by Thomas's understanding and lack of judgment. Charles Bennet had never spoken to her with such kindness and wisdom. As they sat by the fire, Helena found herself comparing Thomas to Charles. Charles had been handsome and charming, but he had also been selfish. Helena woke up early the next morning excited to begin learning about gardening. Thomas was already awake, preparing for another day of work. He seemed pleased that Helena wanted to join him. We will start with the basics, Thomas said as they walked to the vegetable garden behind the cottage. First, you need to understand soil. Thomas knelt down and picked up a handful of dirt. Helena had never touched soil before, and she hesitated when Thomas offered her some. It will not hurt you, Thomas said with a gentle smile. Soil is what feeds all living things. Helena carefully took some soil in her hands. It felt cool and soft, not dirty and disgusting like she had expected. Good soil has many different things in it, Thomas explained. It has tiny pieces of old leaves and plants that have rotted and become food for new plants. It has small stones and sand that help water flow through it. It even has tiny insects and worms that help keep the soil healthy. Helena examined the soil more closely and was amazed to see all the different things Thomas was describing. What had looked like simple dirt was actually a complex mixture of many different materials. How do you know if soil is good for growing plants? Helena asked. Thomas showed Helena how to test soil by looking at its color, feeling its texture, and even smelling it. Good soil, he explained, should be dark brown and smell fresh and earthy. The soil in this garden is very good because I have been adding compost to it for years, Thomas said. What is compost? Helena asked. Thomas led her to a large pile behind the greenhouse. The pile contained old vegetable scraps, fallen leaves, and other plant materials that were slowly rotting into rich, dark soil. Instead of throwing away old food and dead plants, I put them in this pile, Thomas explained. Over time, they break down and become excellent food for new plants. It is nature's way of recycling. Helena was fascinated by this idea. In her family's house, all scraps and waste were simply thrown away. She had never thought about what happened to them or how they could be useful. Thomas spent the morning teaching Helena how to plant seeds and care for young plants. He showed her how to make small holes in the soil, place seeds at the right depth, and cover them gently. Plants are like babies, Thomas said. They need the right amount of food, water, and attention to grow strong and healthy. Helena found that she enjoyed working with her hands in the soil. It was peaceful and satisfying in a way she had never experienced before. When she was finished planting a row of bean seeds, she felt proud of her work. You are a natural gardener, Thomas said, watching Helena carefully water her newly planted seeds. Over the following weeks, Helena spent more and more time working with Thomas in the gardens. She learned to identify different types of plants and understand what each one needed to thrive. Thomas taught her that some plants, like tomatoes, needed lots of sun and warm weather. Other plants, like lettuce, preferred cooler weather and could even grow in partial shade. Some plants helped each other when grown together, while others competed and should be kept apart. It is like understanding personalities, Thomas explained. Some people work well together and others do not. Plants are the same way. Helena began to see that gardening was much more complex and interesting than she had ever imagined. It required knowledge, planning, and careful observation. Thomas was like a scientist who studied the behavior of plants and found ways to help them grow better. One day, Thomas showed Helena a letter he had received from another gardener in Scotland. This man has developed a new way to grow potatoes that produces twice as many potatoes from the same amount of land, Thomas said excitedly. Helena read the letter and was impressed by the detailed scientific information it contained. The Scottish gardener described his experiments with different planting methods and included drawings and measurements. You write letters like this to other gardeners? Helena asked. Yes, we share information about what we are learning, Thomas said. When one gardener discovers something useful, we all benefit from that knowledge. Helena realized that Thomas was part of a community of people who were working together to improve farming and gardening. They were not competing with each other, but helping each other learn and grow. Would you like to help me write a letter about our experiments with the recycled containers? Thomas asked. Helena was surprised and pleased that Thomas wanted her help. I would like that very much. They spent the evening writing a letter to Thomas's friend in Wales. Helena helped Thomas organize his thoughts and write them clearly. She discovered that her education in writing and language was very useful for this kind of work. You write much better than I do, Thomas said admiringly. Your sentences are clearer and more elegant. Helena felt proud that her skills could be useful for Thomas's important work. In her old life, her writing ability had only been used for social letters and poetry. Now she was helping to share scientific knowledge that could help farmers grow. More food in as the weeks passed. Helena and Thomas began working together more closely. Helena's education and social skills complemented Thomas's practical knowledge and scientific curiosity. Helena suggested that Thomas organize his notes and observations into a proper book that could be published and shared with more people. Your ideas about sustainable farming could help thousands of farmers, Helena said. But right now only a few people know about them. Thomas had never thought about publishing his work. Who would be interested in reading about the ideas of a simple gardener? Anyone who wants to grow food more efficiently, Helena replied. Your ideas are valuable regardless of your social status. Helena began helping Thomas organize his years of notes and observations. She discovered that Thomas had documented hundreds of experiments and innovations. His work was detailed and scientific, better than many published books she had read. Thomas, this is amazing work, Helena said as she read through his journals. You have solutions here for problems that farmers face all over England. Thomas looked embarrassed but pleased. I never thought my work was important enough to share widely. Your work is absolutely important, Helena insisted. You could help farmers feed more people with less land. You could help poor families grow their own food and medicine. This knowledge could change many lives. Helena's enthusiasm and confidence began to inspire Thomas. He started to see his work through her eyes and realize its true value. Together, they began writing letters to agricultural societies and farming journals. Helena used her knowledge of proper letter writing and social connections to help Thomas present his ideas to people who could support and promote his work. Helena also suggested improvements to Thomas's experiments based on her different perspective and education. She helped him think about how to explain his ideas to people who were not gardeners. You understand things about plants that I never would have thought of, Thomas told Helena one evening. And I understand things about writing and communication that you never learned. Together we can accomplish much more than either of us could alone. Helena realized that Thomas was right. Their partnership was creating something new and valuable. Her education and social skills, combined with Thomas's practical knowledge and scientific mind, made them a powerful team. Helena also discovered that she genuinely enjoyed working with Thomas. He was patient, kind, and always willing to explain things she did not understand. He listened to her ideas with respect and never made her feel inferior because she was learning. Thomas, in turn, seemed to appreciate Helena's intelligence and enthusiasm. He often asked for her opinion on his experiments and valued her suggestions. One evening, as they sat by the fire working on a letter to a farming journal, Helena realized that she was happier than she had been in months. She was learning new things every day, doing work that felt meaningful, and spending time with someone who respected and valued her. Thomas, Helena said suddenly, I want to thank you. Thank me for what? Thomas asked, looking up from his writing. For being so kind to me, Helena said. I know this marriage was forced on both of us, but you have made the best of it. You have treated me with respect and patience, and you have taught me so much. Thomas set down his pen and looked at Helena seriously. Helena, I should thank you, too. Before you came here, I worked alone and rarely shared my ideas with anyone. You have helped me see that my work could be important to other people. You have given me confidence I never had before." Helena felt warmth spread through her chest. For the first time since her marriage, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "I never expected to enjoy this life," Helena admitted. "I thought being married to a gardener would be boring and difficult, but learning about plants and working on these projects with you is more interesting than anything I did in my old life." "What did you do in your old life?" Thomas asked curiously. Helena thought about her days as Lord Ashworth's daughter. "I attended parties and social events. I played piano and painted watercolors. I read novels and wrote letters to friends about gossip and fashion." "That sounds pleasant," Thomas said. "It was pleasant, but it was not meaningful," Helena replied. "I never did anything that helped other people or made the world better. Everything I did was just for my own entertainment." Helena paused and looked around their small cottage. 6 months had passed since Helena's wedding day, and she barely recognized the woman she had become. Her hands, once soft and white, now had calluses from working in the garden. Her skin had a healthy glow from spending time outdoors. Most importantly, her eyes sparkled with purpose and enthusiasm instead of sadness and fear. Helena woke up each morning excited about the work she and Thomas would do together. They had developed a routine that felt natural and comfortable. Thomas would start his regular gardening duties early in the morning, while Helena prepared their breakfast and organized their research materials. After breakfast, they would work together on their experiments and writing projects. Helena had become skilled at documenting Thomas's observations and turning them into clear, organized reports. She had also started conducting her own experiments with different plants. One morning, Helena made an important discovery. She had been testing which plants grew best in different types of soil, and she noticed something that Thomas had missed. "Thomas, come look at this," Helena called from the greenhouse. Thomas hurried over to see what Helena had found. She pointed to 2 identical plants that had been grown in different soil mixtures. "This plant was grown in soil with more sand mixed in," Helena explained. "Look how much larger its roots are compared to the other plant." Thomas examined both plants carefully. "You are absolutely right," he said with excitement. "The sandy soil is helping the roots spread out more, which makes the whole plant stronger." Helena felt proud that she had made a real contribution to their research. "I think this could be very useful for farmers who have heavy clay soil. If they add sand to their fields, their crops might grow much better." Thomas looked at Helena with admiration. "That is an excellent observation. We should test this idea with different types of crops." Helena and Thomas spent the next few weeks testing Helena's theory with various plants. They discovered that many crops did indeed grow better in soil that had been mixed with the right amount of sand. This could help farmers all over England, Thomas said as they reviewed their results. "Many farms have clay soil that is difficult to work with. Your discovery could increase crop yields significantly." Helena felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had started as a complete beginner who knew nothing about plants, but now she was making discoveries that could help farmers feed more people. Helena's confidence grew with each successful experiment. She began suggesting new research projects and writing detailed reports about their findings. Thomas encouraged her curiosity and treated her as an equal partner in their work. One day, a letter arrived that changed everything for Helena and Thomas. It was from the Royal Agricultural Society in London, responding to one of the reports they had submitted. "Dear Mr. Hartwell," the letter began, "we have reviewed your research on sustainable farming techniques with great interest. The Agricultural Society would like to invite you to present your findings at our annual conference in London." Helena read the letter with growing excitement. "Thomas, this is wonderful. The Royal Agricultural Society wants to hear about our work." Thomas looked stunned. "I cannot believe they are interested in the work of a simple gardener." "You are not a simple gardener," Helena said firmly. "You are a brilliant researcher who has developed important innovations. The Agricultural Society recognizes your value, even if you do not." Thomas was nervous about speaking to a group of educated gentlemen in London, but Helena encouraged him to accept the invitation. "I will help you prepare your presentation," Helena offered. "We can organize your research into A clear, persuasive talk that will show them how valuable your work is. Helena spent weeks helping Thomas prepare for the conference. She helped him organize his ideas, create visual displays of his research results, and practice speaking confidently about his work. Remember, these men may have fancy titles and expensive clothes, but they do not know as much about plants as you do, Helena told Thomas. Your knowledge and experience make you their equal. When the day came for Thomas to travel to London, Helena desperately wanted to go with him. But wives of gardeners were not invited to attend such conferences. Wish you could come with me, Thomas said as he prepared to leave. This work belongs to both of us now. I will be here when you return. Eager to hear about everything that happens, Helena replied. Thomas was gone for 3 days. Helena spent the time working in their gardens and writing up their latest research results. She felt nervous and excited about how Thomas's presentation would be received. When Thomas returned, his face was glowing with happiness and excitement. Helena, it was amazing, Thomas said as he hugged her. The gentlemen at the conference were very interested in our research. They asked many questions and wanted to know more about our methods. Thomas told Helena about the conference in great detail. He had presented their research on soil improvement, plant nutrition, and sustainable farming techniques. The audience had been impressed by the scientific rigor of his work and the practical value of his discoveries. Several farmers want to visit our gardens to see our experiments in person, Thomas reported, and the Agricultural Society wants us to write a series of articles for their journal. Helena felt thrilled by Thomas's success, but she also felt a little sad that she had not been there to share the experience with him. Thomas seemed to understand her feelings. Helena, I told everyone at the conference that this research was a partnership. I explained that my wife had contributed equally to our discoveries and our writing. Helena was touched that Thomas had given her credit for their shared work. Thank you for acknowledging my contributions. The gentlemen were surprised to hear that a woman was involved in agricultural research, Thomas continued. But when I described your discoveries and your writing skills, they were very impressed. Over the following months, Helena and Thomas received many visitors who wanted to learn about their farming innovations. Wealthy landowners, university professors, and government officials came to their small cottage to see their experiments and hear about their results. Helena was initially nervous about meeting such important people, but she discovered that her education and social skills were very valuable for these interactions. She could speak confidently with educated gentlemen and explain complex ideas in ways they could understand. Thomas, meanwhile, impressed visitors with his deep knowledge and practical expertise. Together, Helena and Thomas made a powerful team that could communicate with people from all levels of society. Helena also discovered that she had a talent for teaching. When wives of visiting landowners came with their husbands, Helena would show them around the gardens and explain how they could apply some of the techniques in their own homes. Mrs. Hartwell, you explain these concepts so clearly, one lady said after Helena had taught her about composting. Have you considered writing a book for women about household gardening? The idea intrigued Helena. Most books about gardening were written for men who managed large farms, but many women were responsible for household gardens and could benefit from practical gardening knowledge. Helena discussed the idea with Thomas that evening. I could write a book that teaches women how to grow vegetables and herbs for their families, Helena said. It could include information about growing medicinal plants and preserving food. Thomas was enthusiastic about Helena's idea. You could reach many more people through a book than we can reach through visits and lectures. Helena began working on her book in the evenings. She wrote in simple, clear language that any woman could understand, regardless of her education level. She included practical advice about gardening in small spaces, growing food on limited budgets, and using plants for household medicine. As Helena worked on her book, she realized how much she had changed since her marriage. She had started as a sheltered young woman who knew nothing about practical life. Now she was becoming an expert on agriculture and preparing to publish her own book. Helena also realized that her relationship with Thomas had deepened into genuine love and partnership. They shared common interests, respected each other's abilities, and worked together toward shared goals. One evening, as they sat by the fire working on their respective writing projects, Helena looked at Thomas and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thomas," she said softly, "I need to tell you something." Thomas looked up from his work with a questioning expression. "I love you," Helena said simply, "not because I have to as your wife, but because you are a wonderful man who has helped me become the person I was meant to be." Thomas set down his pen and moved closer to Helena. "I love you too, Helena. You have brought intelligence, enthusiasm, and joy into my life. You have helped me see that my work has value and meaning." Thomas took Helena's hands in his. "When we first married, I thought we were both trapped in an unfortunate situation. But now I believe we found each other for a reason. We make each other better." Helena felt tears of happiness in her eyes. "My father intended this marriage to be a punishment, but it has become the greatest blessing of my life." That night, Helena and Thomas became truly married in their hearts as well as in law. They had built a partnership based on love, respect, and shared purpose. Helena reflected on how different her life was from what she had expected. 2 years after Helena's wedding day, the small cottage behind the stables had become famous throughout England. Carriages arrived regularly, bringing visitors who wanted to learn about the revolutionary farming methods developed by Thomas and Helena Hartwell. Helena's book, The Lady's Guide to Practical Gardening, had been published 6 months earlier and was selling very well in London bookshops. Women from all social classes were buying the book to learn how to grow their own food and medicine. "Mrs. Hartwell, your book has helped me feed my family much better," wrote one reader from Yorkshire. "Before reading your book, I knew nothing about gardening. Now I grow enough vegetables to last us through the winter." Helena received dozens of letters like this every week. She kept all of them in a special box and read them when she needed encouragement. Knowing that her work was helping families across England gave her tremendous satisfaction. Thomas's reputation had grown even more dramatically. After his successful presentation to the Royal Agricultural Society, he had been invited to speak at universities and farming conferences throughout the country. His innovative techniques were being adopted by farmers who were seeing remarkable improvements in their crop yields. The most exciting development came when the government invited Thomas to advise them on agricultural policy. England was facing food shortages due to poor harvests and a growing population. Government officials hoped that Thomas's methods could help the country produce more food. "Mr. Hartwell, your research suggests that farmers could increase their crop yields by 30% using your soil improvement techniques," said Sir William Crawford, a government minister who had come to visit their gardens. "That is correct, sir," Thomas replied confidently. "And these techniques do not require expensive equipment or materials. Any farmer can implement them with proper instruction." Helena stood beside Thomas during these important meetings, taking notes and asking intelligent questions. She had become skilled at understanding government policies and their practical implications for farmers. "Mrs. Hartwell, I understand that. You have conducted significant research on plants that can be grown for medicinal purposes," Sir William said to Helena. "Yes, sir," Helena replied. "We have identified several plants that can be grown easily in English climate and used to treat common illnesses. This could reduce England's dependence on expensive imported medicines." Sir William was impressed by Helena's knowledge and confidence. "Would you be willing to prepare a report on medicinal plants for the Ministry of Health?" Helena felt thrilled by this opportunity. "I would be honored to help, sir." Over the following months, Helena and Thomas worked closely with government officials to develop new agricultural policies. Their small cottage became an unofficial research center where important decisions about England's farming future were made. Helena's role in these discussions was unusual for a woman, but her expertise was so valuable that government officials overlooked social conventions. She had become one of the most knowledgeable people in England on practical agriculture and household food production. "Helena, you speak with government ministers as confidently as any man," Thomas observed one evening after a particularly important meeting. "I have learned that knowledge and competence matter more than social status or gender," Helena replied. "When I can solve problems that they cannot solve, they listen to me with respect." The success of their work also brought financial rewards. Thomas was paid well for his consulting work with the government and universities. Helena received royalties from her book sales and payments for articles she wrote for agricultural journals. For the first time in his life, Thomas had enough money to live comfortably and pursue his research without worrying about basic necessities. He used some of his earnings to expand their experimental gardens and purchase better equipment. Helena used her earnings to establish a small school where she taught local women about gardening and household management. Many of these women were poor and had never learned practical skills for feeding their families efficiently. "Mrs. Hartwell, before your classes, I struggled to feed my children," said Mary Thompson, a young mother who attended Helena's school. "Now I grow enough food to keep them healthy, and I even preserve extra food for winter." Helena found teaching to be deeply rewarding. She was sharing knowledge that could improve people's lives in immediate, practical ways. The success of Helena and Thomas's work also began to change attitudes about social class and marriage. People started talking about the remarkable partnership between Lord Ashworth's daughter and her gardener husband. "Did you hear about the Hartwells?" Helena overheard one visitor say to another. "They have accomplished more together than most wealthy couples accomplish in their entire lives. It just shows that a person's character and abilities matter more than their birth," the other visitor replied. Helena felt proud that her marriage was helping to change people's ideas about what was possible when people from different social classes worked together as equals. Helena's relationship with her own family also began to improve. Lord Ashworth had initially been embarrassed by Helena's marriage, but he could not ignore her growing fame and success. "Helena, I have been reading about your work in the newspapers," Lord Ashworth said during his first visit to the cottage. "In 2 years." Helena greeted her father politely but without the fear she had once felt around him. "Thank you for coming to see what Thomas and I have built together, Father." Lord Ashworth looked around the cottage and gardens with amazement. The small property had been transformed into an impressive research center with multiple greenhouses, experimental plots, and a library of agricultural books. "I must admit I never expected this marriage to lead to such remarkable achievements," Lord Ashworth said. "Thomas is an exceptional man," Helena replied. "I am grateful that you chose him as my husband, even though that was not your intention." Lord Ashworth looked uncomfortable but also impressed. "Perhaps I underestimated both of you." Thomas joined them for dinner that evening, and Lord Ashworth was surprised by Thomas's intelligence and education. By the end of the visit, Lord Ashworth was treating Thomas with genuine respect. "Thomas, you have made my daughter happier and more accomplished than I ever thought possible," Lord Ashworth said before leaving. Helena's mother and brother also began visiting regularly and developed real friendships with Thomas. The family that had once been ashamed of Helena's marriage now bragged about her accomplishments to their friends. "My daughter has written a book that is helping thousands of women across England," Lady Margaret told her friends proudly. The transformation in Helena's family relationships was deeply satisfying. She had proven that her marriage was not a punishment or a failure, but a success that had benefited everyone involved. Helena and Thomas also began receiving invitations to social events that they had never expected to attend. Wealthy families who were interested in agricultural innovation invited them to dinner parties and social gatherings. Helena found it amusing to attend parties as the wife of a gardener after having been excluded from such events as a disgraced daughter, but now she was invited because of her own accomplishments rather than her father's status. "Mrs. Hartwell, we are so honored to have you at our party," said Mrs. Elizabeth Pemberton, the wife of a wealthy landowner. "Your work is the talk of London society." Helena enjoyed these social events, but she was always eager to return to her simple cottage and her work with Thomas. She had learned that meaningful work and true partnership were more satisfying than social status and wealth. One evening, as Helena and Thomas walked through their gardens, they talked about how much their lives had changed. 3 years ago, I was a lonely gardener with ideas that no one wanted to hear," Thomas said. "Now I am advising the government and speaking at universities." 3 years ago, I was a foolish girl who thought love meant finding someone exciting and romantic," Helena replied. "Now I know that real love means finding someone who helps you become your best self." They stopped beside the roses that Thomas had been tending when Helena first arrived at the cottage. The roses were now larger and more beautiful than ever, just like their marriage had grown and flourished. "Helena, do you ever regret the choices that led you here?" Thomas asked. Helena considered the question carefully. "I regret the pain I caused my family, and I regret being naive about Charles Bennett. But I do not regret anything that led me to you and to this life we have built together." Thomas smiled and took Helena's hand. "I used to think that my humble background would always limit what I could achieve. You helped me realize that knowledge and hard work can overcome any social barriers." As they walked back to their cottage, Helena reflected on the unexpected turns her life had taken. What had started as the worst day of her life had become the beginning of her greatest happiness and success. Helena had learned that sometimes the most valuable gifts come disguised as punishments, and sometimes the most unlikely partnerships create the most beautiful results. 5 years had passed since Helena's wedding day, and the small cottage behind the stables had become the center of agricultural innovation in all of England. What had started as a punishment had transformed into a triumph that no one could have imagined. Helena stood in her expanded greenhouse, now 3 times its original size, watching Thomas demonstrate his latest discovery to a group of visiting professors from Oxford University. Her husband had become one of the most respected agricultural scientists in Europe, consulted by governments from Scotland to Italy. "Gentlemen, observe how this new planting technique increases root development by 40%, Thomas explained confidently to his distinguished audience. "This single innovation could help solve food shortages across the continent." Helena smiled as she watched Thomas command the attention of some of England's most educated men. The shy gardener who had once doubted the value of his own work now spoke with the authority of a true expert. "Mrs. Hartwell, your husband's methods are revolutionary," said Professor James Mitchell from Oxford. "But we understand that you have contributed equally to these discoveries." "Thomas and I work as partners in all our research," Helena replied. "Our different backgrounds and skills complement each other perfectly." Professor Mitchell nodded approvingly. "It is rare to see such successful collaboration between husband and wife. Your partnership has produced remarkable results." Helena had heard similar comments many times over the past few years. Their marriage had become famous not just for their agricultural innovations, but as an example of what could be accomplished when 2 people truly work together as equals. Helena's own reputation had grown tremendously. Her book, The Lady's Guide to Practical Gardening, had been translated into French, German, and Italian. She was now working on a second book about medicinal plants that had already attracted interest from publishers across Europe. More importantly, Helena had established the Hartwell Institute for Women's Agricultural Education. The institute trained women from all social classes in practical farming and household management skills. Graduates of the program were helping families across England improve their nutrition and self-sufficiency. "Mrs. Hartwell, the institute has changed my entire life," said Sarah Johnson, one of Helena's most successful students. Sarah had started as a poor widow struggling to feed her children and was now managing a successful market garden that supported her family comfortably. "You changed your own life through hard work and determination," Helena replied. "I simply provided the knowledge and encouragement you needed." Helena took great pride in helping other women discover their own capabilities. Many of her students had gone on to establish their own small businesses growing and selling food and medicinal plants. The success of Helena and Thomas's work had also attracted attention from the highest levels of government. King George himself had visited their cottage the previous year to learn about their agricultural innovations. "Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell, your work is helping to secure England's future," the king had said during his visit. "The techniques you have developed could help our country feed its growing population and reduce our dependence on imported food." Following the royal visit, Thomas had been appointed as special advisor to the Crown on agricultural innovation. Helena had been appointed as special advisor on women's rural education. These were unprecedented positions that recognized their expertise and contributions to the nation. The financial rewards of their success had allowed Helena and Thomas to purchase additional land around their cottage. They had expanded their experimental gardens and built a proper research laboratory. They had also hired several assistants to help with their growing workload, but Helena and Thomas remained committed to their simple lifestyle. They still lived in their original cottage, though they had added a few rooms for comfort. They still worked in their gardens with their own hands and enjoyed quiet evenings by the fire. "We could buy a grand house and live like wealthy people," Thomas had suggested once. "This cottage is where we built our life together," Helena had replied. "I would not trade it for the finest mansion in England." Helena's relationship with her family had been completely transformed. Lord Ashworth, who had once been ashamed of his daughter's marriage, now boasted about Helena and Thomas's accomplishments to anyone who would listen. "My daughter and her husband have revolutionized agriculture in England," Lord Ashworth told his friends proudly. "Their work is helping to feed thousands of people." Helena's mother visited the cottage regularly and had become genuinely fond of Thomas. "You have made my daughter happier than I ever dreamed possible," Lady Margaret often told Thomas. Helena's brother William had also become a close friend and supporter of their work. He had used his inheritance to invest in agricultural improvements on the family estate, implementing many of Thomas and Helena's innovations. "Sister, you have taught me that real nobility comes from serving others, not from inherited titles," William had told Helena recently. The transformation in her family's attitudes was deeply satisfying to Helena, but she valued their respect, because it was earned through accomplishments rather than given because of birth. Helena and Thomas had also received recognition from agricultural societies across Europe. They had been invited to speak at conferences in Paris, Berlin, and Rome. Their research papers were published in scientific journals and studied by agricultural experts worldwide. The Hartwell method had become a standard term used by farmers and scientists to describe their integrated approach to sustainable agriculture. Universities were teaching courses based on their innovations, but perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from ordinary farmers and families who had benefited from their work. "Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell, before I learned your methods, my farm barely produced enough food to feed my family," wrote one farmer from Wales. "Now I grow enough to feed my family and sell surplus crops at the market. You have changed our lives completely." Helena kept all such letters in a special collection. These messages from real people whose lives had been improved meant more to her than any official honors or awards. On a quiet evening in late spring, Helena and Thomas sat in their garden watching the sunset. Their experimental plots were flourishing, with dozens of different crops and flowers. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming plants and the peaceful sounds of evening birds. "Helena, do you remember what you expected your life to be like when you were young?" Thomas asked. Helena thought about her girlhood dreams of marrying a wealthy gentleman and living a life of social events and leisure. "I thought happiness meant having wealth, status, and an exciting romance," she said. "And what do you think happiness means now?" Thomas asked. "I think happiness means having meaningful work, true partnership, and the ability to help other people," Helena replied. "Everything we have built together has given me more satisfaction than anything I ever imagined in my old dreams." Thomas reached over and took Helena's hand. "When your father forced us to marry, I thought my life was being disrupted by someone else's problems. I never imagined that you would become my greatest blessing." Helena squeezed Thomas's hand affectionately. "My father intended our marriage to be a punishment that would teach me humility and responsibility. He succeeded, but not in the way he expected." "How do you think he feels about that?" Thomas asked with amusement. "I think he is proud of what we have accomplished, even though it was not what he planned," Helena said. "He has learned that sometimes the best outcomes come from unexpected beginnings." As darkness fell over their gardens, Helena reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought her to this moment. 5 years ago, she had been a disgraced young woman facing social ruin. Now she was a respected expert whose work was improving lives across England and beyond. Helena had learned that true love was not the passionate romance she had experienced with Charles Bennet, but the deep partnership and mutual respect she shared with Thomas. Together they had accomplished things that neither could have achieved alone. Their story had become an inspiration to others who face difficult circumstances or unconventional life paths. Helena regularly received letters from young women who were encouraged by her example to pursue education and meaningful work. Mrs. Hartwell, your story gives me hope that I can create a meaningful life even though my family has no money or status, wrote one young woman from London. Helena always responded to such letters with encouragement and practical advice. She wanted other women to know that anyone could build a successful and fulfilling life through hard work, education, and determination. The cottage that had once represented Helena's exile from society had become a beacon of hope and innovation. Visitors came from around the world to learn from Thomas and Helena's example. The Hartwells have proven that the most important qualities in marriage are compatibility, shared values, and mutual respect, wrote one journalist who had visited to write a story about their success. Helena and Thomas had also inspired changes in attitudes about social class and marriage. More couples were choosing partners based on character and compatibility rather than social status and wealth. As Helena and Thomas prepared for bed that night, they talked about their plans for the future.